Welcome to the first chapter of BAF 101, which is personal finance. And, while it's really important for you to do well in this class and to work towards a high grade, it is even more important that you understand the information because this class can absolutely help every one of you to be more successful in your financial life. So you can get out of it as much as you want as long as you put the effort in and really take this information to heart. This can help you to be more successful than most of the adults around you because most people did not have this kind of course in their life. And I guarantee you, if you ask adults around you what class do they wish they would have had, you're going to get personal finance as an answer the majority of the time. So heed this opportunity and make sure that you are trying to learn from this. All right, so we are going to start with chapter 1 talking about personal financial planning. So, personal finances overall is just talking about your money situation, the money you have coming in, going out, the assets that you have, the things of value, the money that you owe. And the planning aspect is the process of managing your money to achieve personal economic satisfaction. If you do nothing, you'll have nothing. It is not accidental that people become financially free to where they are not just bogged down by money and that money is not controlling all of their choices. It is something that you have to plan for. So, financial planning in action. A financial plan is a formalized report. It's not just like, hey, I'm going to try to do better. I'm going to really work towards saving more money. A formalized report saying this is how I'm going to achieve that is really important. In chapter 2, we're going to focus a lot on identifying how much money you have, how much you owe, what you have coming in, what you have going out, and that will really help you to work on this formalized report. It summarizes that financial situation. So, exactly what we're going to do in chapter 2, we are summarizing our financial situation when it comes to putting a financial plan in action. It analyzes our financial needs after we look at what our current situation is financially. That will help us to see what we are in need of. Wow, I really need to cut back on expenses, or I'm doing really well right now, or I need to put more into a savings account. It will help us to see where our needs lie. It also will help recommend financial activities for the future. So, okay, I see that this month I spent way too much on shopping. So, next month in the future, I need to put specific actions in plan in order to not do that. So, what kind of factors influence your spending and savings patterns? So, your age has a lot to do with it, and kind of the place you are in life. So if you are 15 and you are working at a restaurant and you're making some pretty good money after school or during the summer, you might be like, sweet, I can just spend all of this money. I have no bills. I have nobody depending on me. I can just spend it all, right? Then when you get to be in your 20s, 30s, maybe you're starting a family and you start to see that things are costing money. You buy a house, and maybe you start to have children. So then a lot of times 30s, 40s, that's when you're going to have a lot of expenses for your home. And if you have children, maybe even sending them to college later on. And then likely you'll have less people depending on you whenever you're in your 50s and 60s. And hopefully you've been setting up wealth for yourself. So things really change over someone's lifetime. But it is really fantastic if while you are young, you can set money aside, because when you don't have all those expenses and you do have time working for you, it can really, really help your future self. We'll talk a bit more about that in just a little bit. Your income, obviously, a lot of times that changes with age. When you're 15, you're probably not going to be making nearly as much as when you're in your 40s, especially because you're going to have a college degree. So the income can really influence your household size, how many people is your paycheck going to cover, and your personal beliefs. Now, this could be anywhere from giving to charity, giving to your church, to having the mindset of you only live once and hey, I'm just going to spend everything. Personal beliefs can have a lot to do with how we spend our money as well. So we're going to look at goals and how we can achieve those goals. But first, let's talk about the financial goals and how we are going to categorize those. We have short-term goals, something that you are trying to reach financially within a year. So what might that be for you? Something you're trying to reach financially within the next year. For a lot of people, it's going to be a vacation. I enjoy having some kind of vacation to look forward to once a year. So, for that reason, my husband and I set aside money so that every year we can have that money there ready to meet that goal to go on vacation. So, we set aside money on a regular monthly basis, actually. An intermediate goal is something you're trying to work towards in the next 2 to 5 years. So, what might be something financially that you really want to achieve in 2 to 5 years? Could be a car. Probably not that car. That car looks like it would be way more expensive than what someone would typically save in 2 to 5 years. I don't know much about cars, but that one looks really cool and expensive. But maybe paying for a car, getting a down payment for a car, that might be your intermediate goal. And then a long-term goal, something you're saving for that is more than 5 years out. That can be several different things. It could be college. It could be a down payment for a home. It could even be retirement. So there's a lot of things that cost a lot of money that you may be planning for 5 or more years out. So this is kind of how we categorize our goals. And one thing to keep in mind, if we are trying to go on huge vacations every year and that's our short-term goal, that might hinder our long-term goal of retiring by age 60, right? So if that's our goal is to retire at 60, those yearly vacations may prevent us from reaching that goal. So we need to make sure that our goals are not working against each other. So one way to really work towards a goal, and you've likely heard this in some other course, but is the SMART approach. The goals need to be very specific. What is it exactly that I'm working towards? Is it $5,000 for a down payment for a car? And it needs to be measurable. It's going to be $5,000 and I'm going to want to try to get this in the next 2 years. And we need to know if we're meeting our benchmarks. Action oriented. I'm not just going to, hope that I meet that. Instead, I'm going to say, this is how I can get that. I'm going to pick up, 4 extra hours at work each week. I'm going to cut back on doing that online shopping. I'm going to delete maybe the Amazon app from my phone. I am going to tell my friends that let's watch a movie at my house instead of going out for the movies all the time. Something that is action oriented will definitely help you to meet your goal. Realistic. If you say, I'm going to try to have $5,000 in the next 4 months and you're working 10 hours at minimum wage, that's probably not going to happen. So you want to make sure it's realistic or you're just setting yourself up for failure. And I don't want you to do that at all. It also needs to be time-based. So we've already talked about maybe making it measurable for 2 years from now, or maybe having some check-in points. Okay, if I want to have $5,000 in 2 years, that means I want to have, $2,500 in 1 year. I want to make sure I'm checking in to see if that's working out. So time-based can help us to be able to make sure we're staying on track for these SMART goals. So some things that you really need to know when it comes to talking about finances. Now, these are words that you've definitely heard before, and you likely know what they mean at this point, at least the first couple. But the first one is inflation. That's something that we didn't talk about a lot when I was maybe your age, when I was early 20s, if that's the age that you are. Some of you may be still in high school. Some of you may be, way past that. But inflation is a word that we talk about a lot in the last few years, and that is just the general rise in prices. The more that the prices go up, the less our money has value. If you go and take $10 and stuff it under your mattress, a year later, it's not going to buy what it would have bought when you first stuck it under the mattress due to inflation. And we've seen some very, very high inflation rates recently, which is really discouraging. And hopefully your paycheck has kept up with those inflation rates. Deflation is the opposite, is the decline in prices. And you might think, well, that's what we're looking for. We want a deflation. But that only happens when people are feeling very pessimistic about the economy. So we really don't want that either. What we would expect is to have around 2% inflation each year. And that's what the federal government would expect as well. But that hasn't been the case recently. So that's not always how it works out. How do they measure inflation or deflation? It all comes to the CPI, Consumer Price Index. And this is just a huge amount of goods, a basket of goods, anywhere from housing to gasoline and energy to how much it costs for groceries. It's travel, all of the different things are put into this basket and they're measured. And then they look at the average of how much those go up or down. And that's how much they say inflation or deflation is. Then interest rates. So interest is basically just the cost of money. If the bank has money and you don't, they're going to charge you interest. Now, if you're the one who has money and somebody else doesn't, then you get to charge interest. So that's really nice. But interest rates can work for you or against you depending on if you're the one who has money or you're the one who needs money. So now let's move on to a really awesome formula called the Rule of 72. Now, this is handy because it helps us to see how long it takes us to double our money. That's either double our money that we're making, or it could also be double the money we're spending due to interest. So all you have to do in this formula is take the number 72, divide it by the interest rate, and that tells you how many years it takes to double. Now, one special thing about this formula that's very unique is the interest rate. You don't have to change the percentage to a decimal point. You just leave it the way it is. So if it's 4%, you just leave it as 4, 72 divided by 4. So let's look at an example. If the value of land in an area increases at 4% a year, how long will it take the property values to double? So we do 72 divided by 4, and that would tell us 18 years. So same idea, if you invested your money at 4%, it would take 18 years for it to double. If we invested it at 10%, 72 divided by 10, it would take 7.2 years to double. So it makes a significant difference as to how much interest we're earning or paying. At an annual interest rate of 3.75%, how long will it take savings to double? I wanted to show you this one because the 3.75, again, we just leave it just like that, 72 divided by 3.75. We don't need to move the decimal place. Then it takes 19.2 years to double. So let's talk about opportunity cost. If you've ever taken an economics class, you've heard about opportunity cost. And what it is anything that you are giving up by making a choice. You are watching this video right now, and I'm thankful for that. You could be playing a video game. Hopefully you are not watching a video, playing a video game and watching the video. But you gave up the chance to play that video game. You gave up the opportunity to take a nap. So whenever you make a choice, you're always giving something else up. It's not necessarily a bad thing you're giving up, but whatever you give up is the opportunity cost. So a personal opportunity cost is usually related to time. You watch the video instead of taking a nap. You go to class instead of going to work. So you are choosing to give something up with every decision you make. A financial opportunity cost usually has to do with you spending money versus saving money. So if you spend your money on a $50 meal out, then you are giving up the opportunity to save that money. So the opportunity cost was saving that money and allowing it to, double in 18 years if it was 4% interest rate. So we always need to keep in mind that every decision we make, we are giving something else up. Now, we don't want this to paralyze us. So analysis paralysis, where we never make a decision because we always know we're giving something else up and we're afraid of that. But it is something to consider. If you see a pair of shoes that you like, but you didn't plan on buying, doing that in the moment can really cost you the opportunity to save and invest that money. Doesn't mean that we should never spend any money, doesn't mean that we shouldn't enjoy our lives, but we need to take into consideration that every time we spend money, we're giving up the opportunity to save or invest that for the future. So a basic interest calculation looks like this: amount in savings times the annual interest rate times the time period. That tells us how much interest we're paying. So we have, let's say, $1,000 in savings times the interest rate of 10% for 1 year. That would be $100 of interest that we're going to earn if it's a savings account. The issue with this formula is we're missing something. If we were to say we put $1,000 in savings, we got 10% interest rate, and we saved it for 5 years, it would tell us we're going to get $500. But that's actually not true, and that's because of something called compound interest. So the rest of this chapter is going to be focused on compound interest. So compound interest is where your savings will earn interest, and then that makes the balance larger, so that then the next time you earn interest, you're earning it on a larger balance. If you didn't get that the first time, rewind and listen to it again. It's super, super important. So if you saved $100, you earn 10% interest, you're going to earn $10 in a year. So at the end of the year, you don't just have $100, you have $110, assuming you left it in the savings account. The next year, when you earn 10%, it's not on the $100, it's on $110. So now you have $121. All you had to do was save $100, and you now have $121 sitting in your savings account. So guess what happens in year 3? You've got $121 that earns 10%. So now you end year 3 with $133. So you're actually getting a little bit more interest earned every year. Now, in 3 years, it's not that big of a deal, right? I went from $100 to $133. I mean, $33, that's like one meal out to Five Guys if you get a burger, fries, and a milkshake. So it's not that much. But think about if you had done this with $1,000, or if you had done this, you had kept putting money into it. You keep adding $100 a month to this. It can just expound. So also, if you save it for 10 years, 20 years, 40 years, then that number is just going to grow and grow and grow. And every 7.2 years, based off of the formula, the rule of 72, at a 10% interest rate, every 7.2 years, your money will double. So after 7.2 years, you'll have $200. And then after another 7 years, you'll have $400. So if you put another zero behind that and you just kept letting it grow, it can really compound. So Einstein is known for saying that compound interest is the 8th wonder of the world. I'm not really positive if he said that or not, but it's a little too late to ask him, I guess. So you can imagine that calculating that for, 20, 30, 40 years would take a lot of time. There are formulas that you can find in the book that will show you how to do that. But the primary way that we are going to calculate compound interest and the time value of money, showing that over time, money can gain value if you invest it, is using some cheat sheets. So these cheat sheets are going to help us to understand how to calculate compound interest much faster than doing it year by year or using a formula. All right, so we are going to look at 4 different cheat sheets or exhibits that we're going to use to calculate different scenarios of the time value of money. So let's look at the different scenarios. We'll go through the 4 sheets, and then I'm going to kind of quiz you on 4 different ones to see if you're understanding it. These are not hard to use at all. The challenging part is understanding when to use each of the 4 exhibits that we're going to look at that have to do with the time value of money. So if you want to know the future value of $570 4 years from now, earning 4%, you could go through and do that simple interest calculation, but you have to keep adding each time how much is saved because you're getting 4% that's added to the balance each time. Or you could use the formula in the book, which can be fairly tricky. Or you can use, are you ready? Drum roll, anyone? Exhibit 1A, which is the future value of a dollar amount given in a number of time periods. So the future value, there are 2 charts that say future value, 2 that say present value. You want to choose one that is what you are looking for. So in this, we know the present value is $570. What we want to know is how much is it worth in the future. So we're looking for the future value, which means we use a future value chart. So here's all you have to do. It says 4 years from now. So you get a period 4, and then they're earning 4%. So you go over to the 4%. So we've got 4 years at 4%, and that gives us 1.17. So all we have to do at this point is take our $570 that we're investing today, and we multiply it times 1.17, and that will tell us how much this is worth 4 years from now, earning 4%. It's that easy. If they said you're going to earn 8% for 12 years, you go to 8%, you go down to the row with 12 years, and you would multiply 570 times 2.518. So it's that simple to use. But again, it's understanding which to use. So we use a future value chart when we are looking for the future value. So yeah, Albert Einstein said compound interest is the eighth wonder of the world. He who understands it earns it. He who doesn't pays it. So you can earn it if you're the one saving and investing your money, getting compound interest. But if not, and you're the one borrowing it, you end up paying compound interest. So let's look at the next problem here. We've got the future value of $675 saved each year for 9 years at 6%. So what's different about this? Besides the numbers, what's different that would cause us to use a different chart? We're saving $675. But unlike the last problem, where we just saved that money one time, the $570 one time, this one says they saved $675 each year for 9 years. So they put $675 in their bank account every year for 9 years. Maybe their grandmother gives them this much every birthday. So every birthday they say, I'm going to put this in my savings account where I'm getting 6% interest. So for this reason, we need to use a different chart, but we are looking for how much this is worth in the future. So we will use a future value chart. But Exhibit 1B is the future value of a dollar amount paid in at the end of each period for a given number of periods, also known as, you see at the end of the line here, an annuity. Annuity means a series of payments. So that's why we're going to use this one. So we're going to go to 9 years and 6%. And it gives us 11.491. It's a much higher number because they're putting that money in every year. So we would take $675 times the 11.491, and that would tell us how much it's worth 9 years from now, considering they continued to save that money each year. You ready for the next one? The amount a person would have to deposit today, so we're looking for today's amount, the present value, at an interest rate of 5% in order to have $1,600 5 years from now. So we want to know, how much do I need to put aside today so that in the future I have $1,600? So we're looking for the present value. So we need to use a chart that says present value at the top, because that's what we're looking for. So Exhibit 1C is the present value of a dollar amount to be received at the end of a given number of time periods. Okay, we need $1,600 one time, 5 years from now at 5%. So we use the chart the same way. 5%, 5 years. We take the 1,600 times 0.784. Now this is less than 1, 0.784, which is going to result in a lower number than 1,600. Does that sound right? We need to always stop and think. Okay, maybe I'm confused about which charts to use, so I need to stop and consider, did I use the right one? So if you came up with the answer of $2,000, would that be the right one? Well, that would be saying that you need to save $2,000 and it will earn interest and it will shrink to $1,600. No, if that's the case, you use the wrong chart. Instead, we should get a number lower than 1,600. That way it reflects how much we need to save today so that in the future we can have 1,600. All right, the final chart. You're flying through these. The amount a person would have to deposit today, again, we're looking for the present value, to be able to take out $500 a year, not just 1 year, but every year for 5 years, earning 6%. So they're not just wanting that $1,600 one time. In this case, they're wanting $500 every year for 5 years, which is ultimately $2,500. So if that's $2,500, I would think I need to save less than $2,500 so it will grow to that amount. So we're going to go with the Exhibit 1D, again, we're looking for the present value, but it's the dollar amount at the end of each period for a given number of periods, also known as an annuity. So we're also looking at a series of payments. So we'll go to 6% and we'll go to 5 years, and it gives us 4.214. And this will give us a number when we multiply it times 500 below 2,500 that helps us to see, right, that's what we want. We want it to be less than 2,500 because ultimately that's how much we're getting out of it. Are you ready to be tested on this? Let's look at 4 examples, and they're not going to be in order of those 4 charts. And let's see if you can figure out which chart to use first of all. A family spends $54,000 a year for living expenses. If prices increase 3% a year for the next 2 years, what amount will the family need for their annual living expenses after 2 years? You know, a lot of people jump to the future value of an annuity, Exhibit 1B. And you're right about the future value because we know the present value is 54,000. So we want to know what's the value in 2 years. If we use Exhibit 1B, it would be almost like saying we want to know what this is, 54,000 multiple years in a row all added together. But that's not what we want. And you would end up getting this huge number and say, wait a second, that doesn't make sense that their grocery bill would, or their living expenses would bump up that far with just 3% a year. So then that would bring you back to saying, okay, maybe it's Exhibit 1A, which would be right. We're looking for the future value, but it's a one-time amount in the future. So we're going to go to 3%, and we go to 2 years, and we multiply 54,000 times 1.061. That tells us their gross or their living expenses would be $57,294 a year due to 3% inflation each year for the next 2 years. You can't just multiply it times 6%, like, well, 3% for 2 years, that's 6%, because then it'd be basing the 6% off of 54,000. But in reality, it's 3% on 54,000, which is a higher number, then another 3% on that higher number. So this compounding works whether you're saving or you're spending. All right, if you desire to have $14,000 for a down payment for a house in 5 years, what amount would you need to deposit today? Assume that your money will earn 5%. So which chart would you need to use to find this? So we know the future value. The future value is 14,000. So we want to find a present value. And we only need the 14,000 one time. So it's the present value of a dollar amount, which is Exhibit 1C. So we take that exhibit, we go to 5%, and it was 5 years from now. So we multiply 0.784 times 14,000 down payment. We need to save $10,976. Does that make sense? Okay, if I saved almost $11,000, it earned interest for the next 5 years. Yeah, that seems about right. So make sure you kind of check it for common sense as well. Just 2 left. You're doing great, hopefully. Pete is planning to go to graduate school in a program of study that will take 3 years. Pete wants to have $11,000 available each year for various school and living expenses. If he earns 5% on his money, how much must he deposit at the start of his studies to be able to withdraw $1,000 a year for 3 years? So we know that he wants a future amount. Ultimately, he wants a future amount of $33,000 total, right? 3 years of $11,000 each. But he wants to know, how much can I set aside today so that it can start earning interest to grow to this amount? So we want to find the present value. But it's not just a one-time amount. It's the present value of an annuity, because he wants $11,000 3 times. So we do Exhibit 1D, and then we do 11,000 times our factor here. We got 5%, 3 years times 2.723. And that tells us he should save $29,953 today. It will grow into 11,000 times 3 years. So it'll grow into 33,000. That seems legit. Well, you can probably guess what the next chart is, but let's work through it together. This is a serious example. I want you to really think about this one, okay? Carla Lopez deposits $3,000 a year into her retirement account. That's a decent amount of money, but it's not a crazy amount, right? Because you can have your retirement account taking money out for you. Well, I'm getting ahead of myself. We'll talk about that in chapter 14. If these funds have an average earnings of 7%, which is not crazy, over the next 40 years until her retirement, what will be the value of her retirement account at the time she retires? Okay, every year she's putting in $3,000. Every year it's earning 7%, and it is just compounding. The interest is earning interest, and that interest is earning interest, and that interest is earning interest, and it does that for 40 years. And for 40 years, she continues to put $3,000 in there. So total 40 years times $3,000, that's like $120,000. That's a lot of money she put aside. So if we use the future value exhibit 1B of an annuity, a series of deposits, because she put in $3,000 every year, and we go to 40 years, I couldn't put much of the chart on here, at 7%, we multiply 3,000 times 199.635. And we end up with, okay, she put 120,000 in. That was a big commitment. But it turns into almost $600,000. 3,000 is not really that much to have taken out of your paycheck and put into retirement and invested. But it turned into almost $600,000. This is legit. This is how compound interest works. You made it through chapter 1. There's some more information in the book you should look over as well, but I wanted to cover the highlights. And let me just tell you, you need to be familiar with these charts, not just for this chapter. This will pop up over and over and over again for the rest of the semester. So make sure you familiarize yourself. Make sure you understand which chart to use when.